Nomadic life carries the entire Mongolian culture and heritage. But if these people start to move away to the cities, it's like we're losing our identity and our Mongol identity, culture, and heritage. What are we going to become if we lose our culture?
How's it going, Khulan? How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm very excited about this. Nice to meet you.
So, how did you start to go out to meet nomadic people?
So I just turned 29 last month, and I was born and raised in Ulaanbaatar, the capital city of Mongolia, during the time when my country was transitioning from semi-communist slash socialist regime to a free market economy. So you could
Mhm.
say that Mongolian democracy as old as me.
Ah,
Professionally, currently I work as a principal advisor to the National Statistics Office of Mongolia,
mm,
focusing on developing the national strategy for statistics development for the next 5 years.
mm.
And I also do volunteer work. I maintain a part-time role as a general secretary at the branch of an international nonprofit organization in Mongolia that advocates project management profession.
You're working in the Bureau of Statistics. You're trying to understand, what's happening. At what point do you decide, well, hey, I'm going to just go out to the countryside? And what is there something that makes you think that, and why do you do that?
Okay, so here's the story. I recently started working for the National Statistics Office. Before that, I was in the private sector. I worked in the private sector for about 7 to 8 years. And then I realized that the public service needed more force, new force. And that's when I started to work in the public sector. But the travels, it all came to me, and the reason that I started traveling was my mom passed away, and at the
Oh,
time I was living abroad. I came back to Mongolia to stay with my father because I'm an only child, and it was only three of us, so I didn't want my father to be alone. So I came back to Mongolia, stayed with my father, but my father couldn't really hold too long without my mother, and he was in deep depression, and yeah, and he also got really sick, and I lost my mom to a kidney failure. So after 2 years, my father passed away, and I was left alone. After losing them, I had this enormous space. I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know how to grieve, and I was only 21 at the time. So it was really hard. But both my parents really enjoyed writing. They really enjoyed writing poems, short essays, and they kept many diaries. So every time when I would get sad, or when I would, wonder in sorrow, then I would just take up their diaries and I would read. And what I found in their diaries was that I found out that all of my four grandparents, they came from completely different parts of Mongolia. It's really rare to have that kind of situation, because back in my grandparents' age, what Mongolians did was that when you want to marry someone, most likely your parents would recommend someone that they have known for long, someone that they have, I don't know, lived in the same area with or something. So it was a very rare situation how all of my grandparents came from completely different parts of Mongolia with completely a different kind of climate and weather and geographical location. So my father's father came from the South Gobi Desert in the south of Mongolia. And my father's mother came from the far west, Zahon province. And my mom's mom came from the north side of Bulgan, which has this beautiful forests, beautiful mountains, amazing rivers. It's a very nice nature and beautiful destination. And my mom's father came from Arhanga, which is the west south. So these four people got together and it created me at some point. And that was just so fascinating to me. And at that time, I was looking for this meaning, because I didn't have any meaning anymore. I didn't have my parents anymore. So I started traveling to my grandparents' provinces to really see who my grandparents were, where they lived, and what kind of people they interacted with. So I started my travel from the South Gobi Desert because that's where I felt the most strong connection. And I went to the Great Gobi Desert, met with so many people. My grandfather was a genetics scientist. I come from a very humble academic family. And so everyone knew my grandfather in his province, it was so amazing. And that's what I've been missing, because I lived in developed countries abroad for almost a decade and came back to Mongolia. I was so lost in touch with Mongolia and I didn't know that many people. So it was so nice to see that someone talking about my grandfather's childhood, what he liked, what he did, and so on. It was really nice. And then I also found out like pieces of me from everywhere I went. And I wanted to understand my identity and my personality and characteristics. So for instance, when you go to South Gobi, you will find that the South Gobi people are very resilient and hardworking because the climate is desert and the heat is so extreme. So the livestock cannot find good pasture. Therefore, the herders would work so hard to feed the animals and they don't have water or rivers. That's why the people would carry hundreds of tons of liters of water to water the animals. And that keeps them so busy every day. In Bulgan province, where my mom's mom came from, there's beautiful nature, mountains, forests, grass everywhere, rivers everywhere. So the livestock would just, they have this humongous accessibility to water and food. So what the people do is they chill, they lay back, they party, and so they're very calm and their demeanor is also very calm because they don't have to, strive and survive so hard. But every part in Mongolia, winter is equally harsh. In the wintertime, it could get up to minus 40 degrees to minus 50 degrees Celsius. It's extremely cold. When my friends from Europe, when they complain about weather, I would ask like, so how cold is it really? And they would say, oh, it's minus 22 degrees Celsius. It's so cold. And that's like bikini weather for Mongolians, So it's so cold. And that's why it's really hard to survive in that nomadic life. And that's how I started to travel and really understand my identity, my personalities, and how I got my personality, where I got my personality. It all came together and it made sense to me at the time, and it still does. And that's how I started traveling.
You go in and you start to explore this nomadic, culture, which, like, what is it that about that? I mean, to me, see, that feels like something I've always longed for. And I've always been personally drawn to Mongolia and want to understand it because it feels, as you were describing, these different parts of the world where what kind of life is that? And do we return to it?
I think before we get into the details, I want people to understand two facts. So one is that it was right after I was born, it was in the 1990s. Our population was 2.2 million, but our land is humongous. And out of 2.2 million people, only 600,000 of them were living in the capital city Ulaanbaatar, which means the 2/3 of the population was living in countryside across Mongolia as nomadic herders. and nearly 90% of them were nomadic herders. Whereas now our population raised to 3.2 million, but only 600,000 of them are now nomadic herders. So in the past 30 years, an undeniably dramatic shift has happened. The entire dynamic of the country is changing. And the second fact is that, just as you said, Priscilla, you know, you can easily see the romantic side of nomadic life, turning off your phone, going off grid, being in touch with nature. It's beautiful, no argument in there. But nomadic life is one of the harshest and hardest life to keep up with, because you have to protect your family and livestock from such harsh climate and natural disasters like snowstorms or summer droughts or sudden floods and dangerous species like wolves without any advanced technology. So it's a very challenging life. And in a way, it's very patriotic because we have 70 million livestock. Our population is 3 million, but we have 70 million livestock. But those 3 million people are not responsible for the 70 million livestock. Only the 600,000 of them are taking care of the livestock in such harsh condition. This is why, on the other hand, it's not romantic at all. In the summertime, yes, it's really nice. But what about the rest of the 3 seasons? Because we have continental climate, and the spring, autumn, and winter, they all have their ups and downs and harsh things. So I think nomadic life is one of the harshest life. But overall, essentially, what nomadic life is about is it's really about survival. And nomads survive in a way that doesn't harm the environment, but in harmony with nature. And what I learned from my trips across Mongolia was that it is really about accepting and adapting extreme yet unpredictable changes, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. The mindset is so built with adaptation. They're very agile, which is now what the world is trying to do and learn. We've been trying to adapt and be flexible and adapt these new norms caused by COVID for the past 1 year. And not only people, even the companies, like including the tech giants and Big Four, are making their ways to adapt agile methodology and practices. But what people don't talk about that often is that here's an entire community that made agility its core foundation for the past 2,000 years. And I think that's worth looking into and talk about.
You're lying in your bed, you're staring at the ceiling, you don't know what to do. What the first trip, what month was it in, and how did you decide you were going to do it?
It was in October. I went to South Gobi with my friends. If I recall the year, I think it was in 2014.
You're going to go to the South Gobi Desert, but I mean, they all live, it's not like there's a house to go to, right? So how do you know where to go?
Oh, so you would just, play it by ear. Of course, you have Google Map, but the Google Map works perfectly in the city. But once you get out of the city, you could see the province's main roads. Then there will be the rocky, rusty roads. You don't have pavement roads anymore. So it makes the trip even slower and longer. And once you get into the place where Google Map doesn't work, then you just start to ask from people, You stop and then you talk to people, ask for direction, and then just find your way. So we would start. Yeah.
But how do you know where you're going? You don't know who you're going. Do you know who you're looking for? How do you?
No.
So when you're asking directions, where are you asking directions to?
I would just ask the place where my grandfather grew up. I would just ask like, oh, do you know this place? Do you know this place? And then they would just direct me. So I would just go to a place that I was never been. And then I would just say, hey, I am the granddaughter of Mr. Tivenjo. And then they would just say, oh, Tivenjo? Oh, the scientist? Oh, okay, we know you. Here you go. Come to my home. Come to my ger, and I'll feed you. And then they were just so nice.
Now there's a cultural thing to that. That's part of the culture to invite you into their homes. So just take us through, like, how did that, like, you met somebody, they knew your grandfather, how did they invite you in, and then what happened? Like, where did you go, and what was your experience that first time?
So I came to his village, you can say, and I would just say that, okay, Mr. Tivenjo is my grandfather, and then that person, oh, I know him. So what are you doing here? And I would just say, yeah, I'm just traveling, trying to explore and get to know the place where my grandfather grew up in. Oh, okay, I know people that grew up with your grandfather, or that worked with your grandfather. Let me take you to them. And then somebody would just take me to someone else's ger. Ger is the traditional dwelling. We call it yurt. You can say yurt. So they would just take me to their yurt, and then they would invite me in, and then we would just start to chat and talk. And then they Mongolians usually have already prepared food on the table all the time, and anybody is welcome to eat that. And they would just
I want to know what's on the table. I want to know what they're serving.
Mongolian food is very high in calories, and boiled mutton is an integral part of Mongolian diet. So usually it's dairy products and boiled meat and some biscuit type of thing. I don't know how to call it in English, but it's a sort of a biscuit type of thing. So basically they just invite you in, and as soon as they invite you in, it means that you're allowed to eat the food, drink the tea, and just talk to them. So pretty much that's it. It wasn't really complicated. It's a cultural thing. Anybody can just, walk in and talk to them. And Mongolian people are very hospitable.
What language are we speaking?
Mongolian.
Mongolian, right?
And
So
Yes.
and do you stay there for the night? Where do you stay?
If I need to, I would stay with them. I would just ask, like, hey, can I stay here tonight? And
But
that's it.
if you're not going to stay there, do you go back to the Four Seasons and hang out?
Oh, so basically each province have some sort of small hostels, guest houses, and that sort of thing, but it's not really that functional. We're talking about, far away, thousands of kilometers away from the capital city. So you would just spend the night and then go your way.
Now, when you first start doing this, you do it with two friends, but after a while, I can't imagine the friends want to go every time. How many times have you gone to visit with people out in the country?
Oh, many, many times. I think definitely more than 12, 13 times. And that first time I went with my friends it was the first and only time I went with my friends.
Right.
Because at the time I was also quite scared, because going off grid for thousands of kilometers, going alone, and especially being abroad for 10 years, it was just a little scary. So I went with my friends. But after that, I understood that nomadic people, they don't do any harm. They're so innocent, and they're so caring, and they're so kind. So I was so confident that I could do this alone, because I felt that kind of kindness from them. And since then, I just started traveling alone.
but that's your grandfather's side. So then you go to
Yeah.
the other side, right? So
Yeah.
you were searching for kind of the identity, and then where else did you go that would be very different? Like, tell us a piece of story that is not that. That's one place, but then you talked about some other places that you went. That
Yeah. Did you meet family? Did you meet actual family?
Oh yeah, I did. I found out that I had an, aunt. I didn't know I had an aunt in that place, and I found out that, and she was also a teacher at the school at the province, and that was my grandfather's kid. Then I came back to the city, and I contacted my aunt who lives in Colorado, and then I said, "Did you know that we had this, aunt?" And then she was like, "Oh yeah, we knew." And then I'm just like, why didn't you ever tell me? There were so many things. And also, one of the other things that I found out was that my great grandfather was assassinated by the Soviets during the Stalinist Great Repression. And I had no idea. Nobody ever told me that. because our parents grew up in a society where you didn't have freedom of speech. You were told to what to do, and you were taught Russian and see the world through the Soviets' lens. It turns out during the Great Repression, my great grandfather was a high level monk, high level Buddhist monk. So they were killing and destroying the nobilities and the monks because they were the most intellect ones. It was easier for them to rule the country without the intellects. So it was easier to manipulate the nomadic herders, the kind and innocent herders. That's why they assassinated my great grandfather. Then they wanted to kill his boys, his entire family, his boys. I mean, my grandfather had two elder sisters and one younger brother, and two elder sisters were already married, and then they moved to a place where they followed their husbands, and they weren't there. So they killed my great grandfather. Then they shot my grandfather's youngest brother in the head when he was less than 10 years old. And how my grandfather escaped was that we collect cow dungs and we dry them and we use it instead of fuel to stay warm in yurts. So there's a basket that collects that cow dung. And that basket was hanging from the camel. And my grandfather got into the basket, hid himself, and that's how he escaped from the Soviets. And that's how he managed to survive. And my great grandmother and my grandfather escaped to the North Gobi. They were living in the South Gobi, but they escaped to the North Gobi and they were hidden there for about 8 to 10 years because they were so scared that, you know, they would be following them and trying to kill my grandfather. So they changed the entire history and then they were just too afraid to talk about it. And later, my grandfather was also too scared to not to talk about it to their children. But my father knew about this all along because he was the eldest one in the family. So again, they were so scared that if they do some success, you know, if they achieve or accomplish things in science, because all my family were in academic and science, so they were scared that if they knew, then something bad would happen to them. So they were told to not to ever speak about it. And that's why I didn't know. I had no idea. But then again, when I was traveling, I found out this entire story, and then that was just fascinating.
I mean, it's funny, it seems like you went in search of the nomads, but you really went in search of your own family history and deeper to get a deeper understanding of yourself.
Yeah, but I think it's not only me because during the Great Repression, there were about 22,000 to 32,000 people were killed, all the nobilities, intellects, and monks. So, which means there are 30,000 families like me. So, I'm not really only talking about myself, I'm talking about many people like myself. So I think if everybody would go off and then travel and then look for their identity and look for their ancestors, they would also find amazing, you know, stories.
My question to you is that you said now, you know, there's less people living in this in the nomadic culture. How do you feel about that? And is it, are we in danger of losing things that are precious? You talked about some incredible sort of values or ways of living and being that was peaceful. You didn't feel afraid. How do you feel about that? More and more people moving back into the city, and are we going to lose something? And what do we need to protect really about this way of life, and what do we let go of?
That's what Mongolia promoted to the world for the past decades. That's what Mongolia talked about, you know. The foreigners or expats or travelers, they would come in the best time of Mongolia, which is summertime, the July, during the national traditional celebration called Nadam. It's one of the largest traditional holiday. So most travelers would find the best time to come and see the best life of the nomads and promote that. That's what we do when we travel. We just say, oh, what's the best time to go to Bali? Oh, what's the best time to go to Chicago? And we just try to go at the best time. But behind that best time, there's the real life, the real lesson that we can look into, that we can get inspired from. Nomadic life carries the entire Mongolian culture and heritage. But if these people start to move away to the cities, it's like we're losing our identity and our Mongol identity, culture, and heritage. What if what are we going to become if we lose our culture? Who are we going to become? We're just going to be robots. So I have such strong feeling about this. And people are moving because the conditions of the nomads are becoming harder and harder to live in due to climate change. In the past 3 years, we lost 11 million livestock because of the heavy snowfall followed by summer drought. When summer drought happens, there's a scarcity in grass. So the livestock cannot gain enough fat to survive the harsh winter, which makes it so hard. And this sort of big loss used to happen only once in 10 years or so. But now this is happening every year. The winter is getting colder and colder, and summer is getting hotter and hotter. So there's summer drought and snowstorms. It's just clashing. So it's really hard to survive in that. No wonder the nomads would move away and, look for accessibility and more safer environment to live in. Early in the 2000s, Mongolia had a promising economy depending on the mining sector because we're rich in gold and copper reserves. So therefore, mining was booming at the time. So most of the nomads' kids, the young kids, would move to the city in pursuit of better life and better education and believing in that mining sector's, booming economy. But then again, due to unstable political situations and political cues, the foreign investors just ran away. Of course, anybody would do that if your government is, being unstable and changing the parliament every 2 years. There's no stability. Nobody would believe in that. And the collateral damage is the nomads. It's not the government people. They speak their own language. They have their own, well-off living. And the corruption is rotten in Mongolia. But the real people who's experienced this, the instability of politics and the climate change effect, the only people who are actually affected by this is the innocent nomads. And nobody is talking about them because they don't speak English. They speak Mongolian. Not so many people are interested in them because they're minding their business in rural destinations without social media, without technology. And no one is talking about this enough. That's why it's worth talking about.
Yeah, and you are talking about it, and it's incredible. And I'm hoping people that are watching this or listening will go and explore and, sort of start to go on a search. And you continue to tell your story, and you have an incredible story to tell, which is, thank you for even just opening up a little bit of this, because it's really powerful and it's really important and it has resonance on many topics. There's a lot to think about with your story. So
thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Very nice to talk to you. Thanks for sharing.
Khulan, beautiful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this.